This podcast was produced using artificial intelligence and refined by human editors.
Welcome to another adventure around the globe on Travel with Lara and Luca. I'm Luca, your fellow travel enthusiast.
And I'm Lara, ready to unravel the mysteries of Shanghai with you today. A city where the past dances with the present and the future is, quite literally, being built as we speak.
Shanghai, the pearl of the Orient. It's a place where every alley has a story and every skyscraper reaches for a dream, don't you think?
You're right, Luca. And in today's episode, we're diving into the iconic sights of this megacity. I mean, where else in the world can you stroll along a river and see a timeline of architecture spanning centuries in a single sweep?
Absolutely, Lara. But let's warm up our listeners with a little prelude. Shanghai is not just a city, it's a universe unto itself. Each visit is like opening a new chapter in an endless book.
I couldn't agree more. It feels like every time I'm there, I discover something new. Oh, remember the time we tried to find that tiny jazz bar? What was it called?
The old jazz bar, was it? We ended up getting delightfully lost, stumbling upon this quaint noodle shop with the most aromatic broth I've ever sensed.
Those are the kinds of unexpected moments you just gotta cherish. By the way, Luca, have I ever told you about my first impression of Shanghai?
I don't think you have, Lara, and I'm sure our listeners are as eager as I am to hear this tale.
Well, it was the way the neon lights flirted with the night sky for me. Shanghai doesn't sleep. It's like the city's heartbeat is in rhythm with its lights. They are dazzling, aren't they?
They are, and they tell a story of ambition, innovation, and a touch of playfulness. Speaking of playfulness, do you remember that street performer on Nanjing Road with the...
The one with the puppets. How could I forget? He made his characters dance to a melody that seemed to be composed right on the spot. Pure improvisation.
And that's the essence of travel, isn't it? It's that melody of experiences, impromptu and rich. But now, I think it's time we give our listeners a peek into what lies ahead, don't you?
Right you are, Luca. Today is all about sharing with you the rhythm of Shanghai, from its iconic sights that narrate tales of heritage and futuristic dreams,
to the delicious street food that's as much a treat for the eyes as it is for the palate.
And let's not forget the hidden gems waiting to be discovered by those willing to stray off the beaten path.
And it wouldn't be a Travel with Lara and Luca podcast without some must-see places, the kind that make you pinch yourself because you can't believe you're really there.
That's true. Then, rounding things off, we'll delve into some weird but wonderful facts that only a place like Shanghai could claim.
History buffs, fear not. We have a segment steeped in the past, telling the story of Shanghai's rise from a fishing village to a beacon of global culture.
Oh, and we can't leave you unprepared, so we'll offer some savvy travel tips from our treasure trove of experiences.
Lastly, we'll cover unmissable side excursions because there's a trove of treasures just a stone's throw away from the city's heartbeat.
And as we wrap up our intro, let's start where Shanghai greets the world, the iconic Bund. It's a waterfront promenade like no other, a place where architecture tells the story of an ever-evolving city, looking out over the Huangpu River as the city pulses on.
Get ready to set sail along the river of Shanghai's history and charm with us. But first, after the tease, we're taking a plunge into the iconic sights of Shanghai that you simply cannot miss. Welcome back, folks. You're tuning into Travel with Lara and Luca, the podcast where your journey is our delight. Today, we're delving into the iconic sights of Shanghai.
Nowhere else can you feel the pulse of Shanghai's past, present, and future quite like the Bund. The Bund, with its European-style buildings, it's like going through a time machine, isn't it, Luca?
Absolutely, Lara. Imagine the heads that turned when those buildings first rose up, a stark contrast to the low-lying shanties that once made Shanghai's skyline.
And now they stand dignified as if they've seen it all, from Paris of the East to the financial hub it's now. Luca, have you ever felt so small standing between such historic giants?
Every time, Lara. It's humbling. You know what's not humble, though? The Oriental Pearl Tower. It screams, "Look at me. I'm the future," don't you think?
That it does, towering over. How does it strike you?
Like a giant silver space mushroom? But in all seriousness, a symbol of modernity, providing a contrast to the Bund's history. And what a view from the top.
The views are spectacular indeed, but if heights aren't your thing, there's plenty to see at ground level on Nanjing Road. What's your take on China's shopping mecca, Luca?
Lara, it's like walking into a living, breathing commercial. The neon signs, the bustle, it's overwhelming and yet somehow utterly captivating.
Captivating's the word. The pageantry of window shopping, street performers, and the smell of street foods. Nanjing Road is a sensory overload. And tea houses. You can't forget the tea houses, little pockets of calm amid the storm.
Oh, the contrast, Lara. Speaking of contrasts, let's take a stroll to the Yew Garden. Can we talk about the tranquility that place offers?
The Yew Garden, a sanctuary from the commercial roar, holding within its walls the secrets to harmony and balance. Luca, do you remember the first time we stepped through the Dragon Wall?
As vividly as I remember the carp swishing through the ponds. Yeah, it's a work of art, a painting you can walk through. The pavilions, the rockeries, it's poetry, Lara.
Indeed, every corner is deliberate. Every view is a curated scene meant to evoke reflection and wonder. It's not just the beauty that strikes you.
It's the genius behind it, the philosophy woven into its design, the way the plants and the water and the stone come together.
And yet, as we look up from that serenity and look around Shanghai, the city never ceases to astound. From the peace of Yew Garden to the brilliance of the modern skyline, it's breathtaking.
Breathtaking and always evolving. That's the beauty of Shanghai. A tapestry of times and tastes. A mix that promises and delivers so much to any traveler who graces its streets.
All right, after a quick breather, we'll return with the flavors that'll tantalize your taste buds. Yes, we'll be diving into the delicious cuisine of Shanghai. Stay tuned for some mouth-watering conversation.
And now, we're sinking our teeth into something I've been looking forward to all day, the delicious cuisine of Shanghai. You ready for this culinary ride, Lara?
Born ready, Luca. You know me. A day without exploring food is like a sky without stars, empty and uninspiring.
A poetic start, as always. So, let's dive into the soup dumpling universe, the heavenly Xiaolongbao. Have you mastered the art of eating them without turning into a fire-breathing dragon?
Mastered? I'd say I've got a PhD, Luca. It's all about the nibble, the slurp, and the sigh of contentment. But oh, those first few times, it was like a comedy sketch.
A comedy sketch ending with a scalded tongue, for sure. The precision it requires is almost like a Shanghainese tea ceremony. And each little dumpling, a parcel of perfection.
True, and each tiny bubble of dough tells a story deeper than the broth it cradles. Okay, now I'm getting poetic about dumplings.
Well-deserved poetry. But hey, while we're on the streets of Shanghai in our minds, let's talk about the scallion pancakes, those crispy, flaky discs of joy. They're proof that simplicity plus heat equals magic.
Absolutely, that satisfying crunch, followed by the layers of soft, savory dough. Luca, it's like a symphony for the senses. Do you remember that tiny stall on Yunjin Road?
How could I forget? That line stretched around the block, and the smell alone was worth the wait. It's a battle of the pancakes there, every traveler for themselves.
Speaking of battles, how about the notorious stinky tofu? Shanghai doesn't shy away from this polarizing delicacy.
Ah, the infamous stinky tofu. You know, they say your journey in Shanghai isn't complete until you've braved the pong and taken a bite. It's pungent, yes, but the boldness, it's an acquired taste of victory.
Victory indeed. But when it comes to flavors, we can't forget the sweet side of Shanghai. Hongxiao Ru, that slow-cooked braised pork in sweet soy sauce, sometimes I dream about it.
Dream seasoned with star anise, ginger, and caramelized sugar, no less. It melts in your mouth and leaves behind a tale of comfort and tradition. It's not just food, it's a narrative on a plate.
So true, and speaking of narratives and sweet notes, what's your stance on the Shanghainese penchant for sugar? It seems to find its way into the most unexpected dishes.
You know what, Lara? I'm a fan. Whether it's in their mooncakes or sprinkled over traditional savory dishes, the Shanghainese have this unique way of balancing sweet and savory that always leaves me, well, hungry for more.
It's a balance as delicate as a tightrope walker's step, but they never seem to fall. And that's the beauty of it. Shanghai doesn't just offer food, it presents an entire experience, a taste of history, each dish a chapter in the city's epic gastronomic book.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of history, we'll soon chat about the fascinating past of this megacity. But before we get lost in time, any final savory thoughts on Shanghai's culinary wonders?
Just that I'm counting the days until I can stroll down the streets again with the warmth of a freshly steamed bun in my hands, the air carrying symphonies of sizzles and spices, and the constant, brilliant hum of a city that loves its food.
A perfect final bite to our delicious cuisine segment. Now stay tuned, as we'll soon whisk you away into Shanghai's hidden alleyways and revisit a past filled with tales both glamorous and gritty. So, we've explored the iconic sights, indulged in the culinary delights. What's next on our Shanghai escapade, Lara?
Now, Luca, we venture into the rabbit hole of Shanghai's secret treasures, the hidden gems where the magic really happens.
Oh, intriguing. And I've got a curiosity itch that only Shanghai's lesser-known spots can scratch.
Perfect, because the first hidden pearl I want to shine a light on is the 1933 Slaughterhouse. Don't let the name fool you. It's no longer in the meatpacking business.
True, now it's a maze of art spaces and quirky shops. When I visited, I felt like I was walking through an Escher painting. It's that surreal.
Exactly. I stood in the atrium looking up, half expecting to see a cow float by, carried by its own architectural ambition.
There's no place quite like it. Plenty of spots for that killer selfie, wouldn't you say?
Killer, indeed. Next up, the M50 Art District. It's like the beating heart of Shanghai's contemporary art scene.
M50's the kind of place where you find art in the wild. Not just on the walls, but in every nook, each cranny, and the surrounding air.
The creativity is palpable. I once saw a painting that I swear changed expressions when you weren't looking.
Now for something completely different, Zhujiajiao Watertown. It's astounding how it manages to stay peaceful with the city buzzing in the background.
It's a tranquil retreat. When I was there last, locals were singing folk songs on the water. It was, for lack of a better word, enchanting.
Watertowns do have that timeless vibe. But speaking of water, how's your sea legs, Lara?
Shipshape, Captain Luca. Why do you ask?
Because I think it's worth mentioning the ferry ride from Bund to Pudong. The Huangpu River may be a busy thoroughfare, but that ferry is Shanghai's unsung hero of transportation.
Not to mention, it's a steal at a couple of yuan for the best views of the skyline.
Exactly. It's budget sightseeing at its prime, and you feel the pulse of the city.
Speaking of which, have you wandered through Tianzifang's labyrinthine alleys?
Ah, Tianzifang, where the art of getting lost is not just possible, but recommended.
Each turn offers something new. A boutique, a food stall, or my personal favorite, that tiny shop selling paper-cut art.
I ended up in a bar there that was so small, I had to exit before taking a deep breath.
Now, for our adventurous listeners, Shanghai's underground speakeasies are a must. I won't name names. Finding them is part of the fun.
There's nothing like a password-protected cocktail to quench the thirst for intrigue.
Speaking of intrigue, did you know about the Propaganda Poster Art Center?
I stumbled upon it completely by accident, and the collection provided an unexpected and poignant window into China's past.
Shanghai is truly a city shrouded in layers of both visible and invisible intrigue.
And for a peaceful encounter, I recommend the Songjiang Mosque, one of China's oldest. The blend of Islamic and Chinese architecture is a sight to behold.
Divine indeed. And for a touch of nature in the city, Shanghai's Gongqing Forest Park is our very own central park. It's large enough to host a forest.
Trees in Shanghai are the quiet observers of its rapid changes, I guess.
They're the city's lungs and whisper historical secrets if you listen close enough. Well, we're about ready to wrap up this jewel of a segment. What's our next sparkle, Luca?
Next up, we'll be tiptoeing through the truly bizarre and unusual. Think of it as our cabinet of Shanghai curiosities, the weird facts segment.
I can hardly wait. Shanghai's oddities are as enthralling as its beauties. Listeners, prepare for the wonderfully weird coming right up.
Ah, Shanghai, a city where the past and future coexist in harmony. And you know what, Lara? The real journey through Shanghai's sprawling urban landscape starts with its must-see places.
Absolutely, Luca. And there's no better place to start than the Shanghai Museum. It's like walking through the corridors of time. The ancient bronzes, the intricate ceramics, each artifact tells a story.
Oh, talking about stories, remember that porcelain pillow I almost knocked over last time? I mean, who knew people in ancient China used hard ceramics to rest their heads?
Yes, I was holding my breath the entire time, and they didn't just use them for comfort. Those pillows represented status and were believed to keep your spirit safe at night. Fascinating, right?
So fascinating. But it's not just the artifacts that are impressive. The architecture of the museum itself is symbolic. That round dome and square base, echoing the ancient Chinese perception of the world. Heaven is round, earth is square.
Poetic indeed. Speaking of heavenly places, let's drift past the museum to the peacefulness of the Jade Buddha temple. The serenity in that place juxtaposes the city's buzz beautifully.
Definitely. And let's talk about those two jade statues. It's almost as if they are infused with life, watching over the visitors and worshippers with an otherworldly calm.
Oh, they're impressive, all right? Carved from whole jade stones, one portraying the Buddha sitting, the other reclining. They really embody the essence of spiritual tranquility.
I also love that this is a living temple, not just a relic of the past. You see monks go about their daily lives, chanting, meditating. It adds a layer of authenticity.
Right, and speaking of authentic experiences, you can't leave Shanghai without getting hands-on with science at the Shanghai Science and Technology Museum.
Ah, the place that reignites the curious child in everyone. Remember how we competed to see who could design the most aerodynamic paper airplane?
How could I forget? You were utterly convinced your Luca Wing Glidemide Master 3000 was unbeatable.
Until your Lara Flyer Supreme somehow soared into the lead. That interactive pavilion is the best. But seriously, that museum encapsulates the forward-thinking spirit of Shanghai perfectly.
It really does. There's the space exhibit, the robot exhibit, and even a life-sized replica of a Chinese space station module. Plenty for the inner astronaut in all of us.
Exactly. Now, for a change of pace, let's step into the charming and historic Zhang Garden, a testament to Shanghai's opulent past and refined aesthetics.
Ah, Zhang Garden, such a graceful representation of Shanghai's heritage. The way it's designed, with the pavilions, halls, and koi ponds arranged according to ancient geomancy principles.
Feng Shui at its best. It's all about harmony with nature. The zigzagging bridges throw off evil spirits and lead you through a narrative that's part history, part fantasy.
Imagine those literati and scholars from the Ming Dynasty bestowing their poems upon the landscape, inspired by the beauty around them.
Speaking of inspiration, that rockery with the rumored hidden treasures, a symbolic mountain within the city. There's something new to discover every time you visit.
So true. Each visit feels like reading a book where you find a new detail that alters the whole story.
That's the beauty of must-see places in Shanghai. It's not just about the grandeur or the elegance. It's about the story, the journey.
The journey that continues, right? Because after the break, we're taking a deep dive into the city's unique and sometimes downright bizarre oddities in Shanghai's weird facts. Welcome back to Travel with Lara and Luca. In this segment, we're diving into some of the weirdest facts about Shanghai that'll make your eyebrows do some gymnastics. So Luca, ready to get weird?
Born ready, Lara. Kicking us off, have you heard about the marriage markets in Shanghai?
Oh, totally. Every weekend, parents convene in People's Park with umbrellas.
That's not because it's raining, folks, but the umbrellas display resumes of their single children like a love advertisement.
You'd think there's an app for that. Now, Luca, hit me with another oddity.
Shanghai's face keenies. Picture this. Beachgoers donning colorful masks that cover their entire faces.
Ah, the ultimate fashion statement to ward off sunburns and jellyfish stings.
Now imagine trying to recognize your friends.
Well, that's one way to avoid making small talk. And how about the time when shoelaces were a legal matter in Shanghai?
Ah yes, the Great Shoelace Decree. Not a real name, folks.
You probably couldn't tie your shoes in the wrong part of town without facing a fine for loitering.
Revolutionizing the world, one shoelace at a time. Speaking of which, ever heard of nail houses?
Oh, the houses that stick out like sore thumbs because the owners refuse to sell.
Some are smack in the middle of highways. Talk about a roadside attraction.
Turbocharged stubbornness. Now let's munch on themed cafes. What's your take?
From Hello Kitty to toilet-themed cafes where you literally sit on the throne while dining.
Shanghai sure takes its theme seriously. Anything from the past that tickles your fancy?
Oh, how about Jazz Age Shanghai? It was all the rage in the Roaring '20s.
A saxophone in one hand, oolong tea in the other. What a vibrant time.
Exactly. And nowadays, you can sip a cocktail in a speakeasy bar, whispering passwords to get in.
Now that's what I call old school cool. And ahem, let's not forget about the pigeon spies.
Pardon?
During World War II, the idea of training pigeons with cameras for espionage.
Talk about avian agents, the original drones, eh?
Shanghai's always been ahead of the game. But enough history. What else is weirdly wonderful?
The awe-inspiring Shanghai Grand Theater has a hidden secret.
Do tell.
The entire theater can actually sink down a few meters into the ground if needed.
Singing basement jacks. Where's your theater at? Underground, apparently.
And for friends of the feline kind, Shanghai is home to more than a few cat cafes.
A perfect escape for anyone needing some pause in their busy day.
Definitely. But let's not forget to mention the mind-bending optical illusion museum.
Where up is down and left is right, and you can't trust your eyes at all.
Speaking of seeing, imagine trying to navigate a completely dark restaurant.
Dining in the dark, a true sensory experience minus one very important sense.
And for our musically inclined visitors, the piano building. Yes, it's a building shaped like a grand piano with a violin escalator.
Now that's playing architectural scales. Shanghai never ceases to amaze.
And neither do we, hopefully. How's about we step out of the weird and wander through the past in the next segment?
Can't wait. So folks, get ready to time travel through Shanghai's history where we uncover the myths, the legends, and the revolutions that shaped this enthralling city.
Right after this short imaginary break on Travel with Lara and Luca.
All right, history buffs, buckle up because we're diving deep into the stories that have stitched the fabric of Shanghai together. We're talking history.
And what a rich tapestry it is, Lara. A city's history can be as intoxicating as its nightlife, don't you think? Let's start at the beginning with Shanghai as a little fishing village by the river.
That's right. Funny to think of now with all the sky-high buildings, but it all started with fishing and textiles by the Huangpu River. Humble beginnings for such a global powerhouse, eh?
Goes to show, you can't underestimate a good location, and Shanghai had the primo spot. Fast forward to the 1800s when opium was the center of all trouble.
The Opium Wars, pretty dramatic chapter there. Britain wanted tea, silk, and porcelain from China, but there was a problem. China didn't particularly want anything from Britain.
And so they gave them opium, which, wow, talk about an ethical nightmare. China wasn't happy and bam, we got the Opium Wars.
Absolutely, and following the first Opium War was the Treaty of Nanjing. Shanghai opened up as one of the treaty ports, which was a game changer for the city's international commerce.
That was the starting shot for the foreign concessions, and all that followed, the French concession, the international settlement.
And they gave Shanghai that unique blend of East and West we still see today. Those European-style buildings along the Bund, they're like time capsules from that era.
And speaking of time capsules, Shanghai's 1920s and 30s, often dubbed the Paris of the East, and my personal favorite, the whore of the Orient.
Oh, definitely a slice of intrigue and decadence. It was a magnet for adventurers, a cultural melting pot with jazz clubs, writers, artists, all flocking to Shanghai.
The glamour, though, was shadowed by the rise of the Green Gang and the likes, and those tensions leading up to the World War II.
And then comes a crucial pivot point in Shanghai's story, the establishment of the People's Republic of China. The city underwent dramatic changes under communist rule.
The glitz and glam were out, and political fervor was in. Shanghai had to adapt, as it always does. It's part of the city's DNA, transformation.
And boy, did it transform. The Cultural Revolution hit Shanghai hard. The city's once famed schools, temples, and libraries faced, well, let's call it an enforced decluttering.
But like a phoenix, Shanghai rose again in the 90s, this time shooting for the stars. Literally, with skyscrapers like the Jinmao Tower sprouting up and redefining the skyline.
So it's a story of reinvention, from fishing village to colonial port, from Paris of the East to a global financial hub. Shanghai shows us that cities, much like people, evolve.
And what a journey it's been, huh? The history of Shanghai isn't just about the place. It's about the resilience, the spirit, and
don't you dare say the Shanghainese.
you read my mind. But on that note, let's wrap up our historical dive and gear up for some travel advice.
Coming up next, you won't want to miss our secret hacks for mastering the art of Shanghai travel. It's our expert travel tips. All right, folks, buckle up your seatbelts because we're diving into expert travel tips for navigating Shanghai like the pros you are.
Absolutely, and I'm starting with a golden tip. Shanghai's public transport is a marvel, efficient and extensive. But, and there's always a but, the subway during rush hour is something else.
Oh, you mean how it can feel like a contact sport? Yes, try to avoid traveling during peak times if you want to skip the sardine can experience.
Been there, done that. Definitely agree. And remember to get a transportation card. Works for buses and subways alike and saves you from the fuss of buying single tickets every time.
Plus, there's the added thrill of tapping your way through the turnstiles like a local. Speaking of blending in, shall we tell them about the Shanghai lean?
Oh, please do.
If you're standing on the subway, lean slightly forward right before the train stops. It's what the locals do to brace for the sudden stop. It's like you're in on a public transit secret.
Here's a pro tip. Grab a map with English translations. Some of the station names can be a mouthful, and having it all in English can save you a world of confusion.
On the flip side, try learning a few phrases in Mandarin. It's not just practical, it's also a sign of respect. And who knows, you might find yourself haggling at a market like a champ.
True that. People appreciate the effort, even if your tones are a bit, shall we say, off-key. So Lara, let's talk timing. When's the best time to visit this gigantic metropolis?
For the best weather, consider late spring or early fall. The temperatures are mild, but there's a catch. These are peak tourism months.
Right. If you'd prefer to dodge the crowds, consider visiting in winter, but remember to pack layers. Shanghai may not be Siberia, but it can get pretty chilly.
And if you're into experiencing local culture through festivals, Chinese New Year is vibrant, but again, very busy. Remember, the city is partially a ghost town during the festival, as many locals travel out to be with family.
Speaking of busy, you've got to visit the Bund, but here's the pro tip. Go early morning. Most tourists swarm in the evening for the lights, but morning, it's peaceful and the air is as crisp as a Shanghai spring roll.
That's poetic, Luca. Now on to avoiding tourist traps. It's all about being discerning with your choices, isn't it?
Exactly. Research is your friend. For instance, some tea houses are infamous for scamming tourists. If you're getting pressured into experiencing a traditional tea ceremony, it might be time to politely walk away.
Ah, the art of the gracious exit. Handy in so many situations. In fact, being polite in general will get you far here. Courtesy is a big deal in Chinese culture.
Absolutely. Another tip for authenticity, check out where the locals eat. If you see a queue of Shanghainese folks outside a nondescript eatery, join them. Chances are you're in for a culinary delight.
And don't just stick to the main drag. Wander a bit. Shanghai's alleyways and backstreets are pockets of the city's soul and often overlooked by those without a keen sense of urban adventure.
One last travel hack. Always carry a hotel card with you. No matter how good your Mandarin gets, showing a taxi driver a card with your hotel's address in Chinese characters is universally understood.
Great point, Luca. Well, it looks like we've packed in a suitcase full of tips for our listeners. Next up, we're stepping out of Shanghai for a bit.
That's right. Get ready as we discuss side excursions. Prepare for tales of ancient water towns and scenic getaways that are just a stone's throw from the city hustle. And we're zipping right along to one of my favorite parts of any city visit, the side excursions. You know those trips that take you just a stone's throw away from the hustle and bustle and into something entirely different?
Right you are, Luca. Shanghai's not just a place to visit, but also a gateway to further adventures. And today, we're inviting our listeners to step through that gateway and discover some incredible side excursions.
Absolutely. And let's start with a classic, water towns. Now, if anyone's ever wanted to see Venice, but finds themselves in Shanghai, Qibao is the answer.
I couldn't agree more. Qibao is this charming little town. It's like stepping back in time with those canals and traditional architecture. It's not too far from central Shanghai. Is it, Luca?
Not at all. It's just a quick trip on the metro. What always tickles me about Qibao is the contrast. One minute you're amidst the skyscrapers, the next you're crossing ancient bridges and dodging grannies on scooters.
And the street food. Remember those spicy crawfish, Luca?
How could I forget? You have to eat them wearing gloves. I felt like I was about to perform surgery on my taste buds.
For our listeners, that's a must-try, gloves or no gloves. But let's not keep all our excursions waterlogged. What about something a bit more spiritual?
You read my mind. If we're talking about a pilgrimage, let's chat Mount Putuo. It's one of the 4 sacred mountains in Chinese Buddhism.
Oh, what a serene place. The ferry ride over, the temples, the statues. I felt like I was on a whole different planet from Shanghai.
Right? I love the Puji Temple with its pagodas peeking through the mist. It definitely gives you a moment to reflect. Every time I've visited, I've come back feeling a bit more centered.
And I bet you had a poem brewing in your mind out there, didn't you, oh poet of the podcast?
I did indeed. But let's not digress into my amateur verses just yet. How about those who are itching for a bit more excitement? What side excursion would you suggest?
If it's excitement you're after, why not suggest Chongming Island? It's like the great outdoors is calling bird watching, biking, and Dongping National Forest Park.
I fancied myself a bit of a cyclist until I tried some of those trails. Let's just say, I have a newfound respect for tour bikers.
And if our listeners are wildlife enthusiasts, then the Dongtan Wetland Park is a must. Just don't forget your camera. The birds there aren't shy.
Plus, after all that exercise, you can justify feasting on the local catch of the day. Nothing beats a seafood meal that's fresh from the water.
Now, I know we've talked up the city quite a bit, but Shanghai's surroundings really do offer a different pace, don't they?
They do, Lara. These excursions reveal the layers of the region. Shanghai is the modern face, but a short trip away uncovers the rural heart.
And that heart beats with a rhythm that's rich with history and tradition. It's just waiting for those willing to venture out.
Speaking of venturing out, if our listeners find themselves with a few extra days, they could even tackle Huangshan, the Yellow Mountain.
Oh, the iconic peaks of Huangshan with those pine trees seemingly defying gravity.
I remember watching the sunrise there, Lara, thinking to myself, this is a once-in-a-lifetime view.
And isn't that what travel's all about? Those unforgettable, irreplaceable moments. Standing there among the rising sun, the mist, and those ancient stones, it's humbling.
Travel sure has a way of putting things in perspective. But before we wax philosophical here, let's not forget to mention Hangzhou.
Of course, with Westlake and its poetic vistas, it's like every view is a postcard begging to be sent.
That's true. Plus, those curious about China's tech innovations might enjoy knowing it's the home of Alibaba.
Hangzhou does a beautiful dance between old and new, doesn't it? With its historical heritage and cutting-edge modernity, it's quite the contrast from Shanghai.
Definitely. And on that note of balance and contrasts, let's wrap up this segment. I hope we've sparked our listeners' wanderlust for the excursions that lie just beyond Shanghai's skyline.
I have no doubt about that, Luca. And now, for a bit of a teaser, in our next segment, we'll be rounding off today's journey with a sum-up of our Shanghai experience.
That's right, Lara. Stay tuned for our final thoughts, where we'll take a reflective look back at today's highlights, our favorite personal moments, and share just a hint of what's coming up in our next episode.
It's been quite the adventure through Shanghai and beyond, and we've got just a little bit more to share. So, don't go away. We'll be right back after this quick break.
And just like the ever-changing lights of the Pudong skyline at night, our time talking about Shanghai is coming to a bittersweet end.
I'm feeling a little sentimental, Luca. It's amazing how a city can capture your heart with its vibrant life and hidden stories tucked in every corner.
It's the eternal charm of Shanghai, Lara. You've got these towering skyscrapers brushing the clouds, and then there's that invigorating feeling of walking through a centuries-old alley where history whispers to you from the walls.
Let's do a quick whirlwind recap. We started at the iconic sites the Bund offered us, got our taste buds dancing with Shanghai's cuisine, and stepped off the beaten path to unveil some real hidden gems.
And let's not forget the must-see places that really anchor any trip to Shanghai. There's so much to see and do. It's like the city has a never-ending supply of wonders.
Oh, indeed, and today we shared some weird, quirky facts about Shanghai that you just won't find anywhere else. Like the marriage markets. Who would have thought that'd be a thing?
History lovers had their share too. We delved into Shanghai's past, revealing how it rose from a humble fishing village to the global powerhouse it is today.
And for those planning a trip, I hope our expert travel tips will help you navigate the city with a bit more ease so you can focus on soaking it all in.
Absolutely. If an excursion or a side trip is on your agenda, Shanghai's surrounding areas won't disappoint. From serene water towns to spiritual mountains, there's something magical awaiting.
Reflecting on all this, Luca, what would you say was the highlight of your Shanghai experience?
Oh, Lara, you've put me on the spot. But if I had to pick, I'd say walking along the Bund, feeling the breeze off the Huangpu River, contrasting with the city's hustle. How about you?
For me, it was the Yew Garden. It's this peaceful sanctuary in the middle of urban chaos, almost poetic, you know? But each part of Shanghai has its own flavor, its own rhythm.
And that's the beauty of travel, isn't it? The way it allows us to collect these moments and memories like pearls on a string.
Ah, so poetically put, my friend. And we certainly hope, dear listeners, that you've collected some pearls of wisdom and inspiration from our chatter today.
It's been quite an adventure, and we're sad to say goodbye. But as they say, all good things must come to an end.
But it's not goodbye for long. Remember, there are so many destinations waiting for us to explore, and you can bet your bottom dollar that we'll bring all their stories to life, right here.
Indeed, Lara. Where are we off to next time?
Ah, that's a surprise. But let's just say it's a place with views that will take your breath away and culture that will captivate your spirit. You don't want to miss it.
Sounds intriguing. Listeners, make sure you tune into the next episode of Travel with Lara and Luca. We've got some extraordinary tales in store for you.
Until then, keep your passports handy and your sense of adventure alive. It's been such a pleasure sharing the magic of Shanghai with you all. Stay curious, wanderlust hearts.
And as always, we'd love to hear from you. Share your own Shanghai stories with us, or drop a question about your upcoming travels.
Follow us on our social media channels too. We appreciate every like, comment, and share.
Keep roaming, keep discovering. It's been Travel with Lara and Luca, signing off from the captivating city of Shanghai.
Till next time, stay playful, stay passionate, and keep exploring. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye, everyone.